Joining me now is Richard Painter. He is running for Senate in Minnesota. This is Al Franken's old seat. He was the former ethics lawyer for George W. Bush. Fascinating. He's also one of Donald Trump's most ardent critics, and he's also a champion of campaign finance reform. Fascinating fellow. So let's have a conversation. Richard, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Let's start with Trump. Let's go to Bush, and then let's see what happens. You've talked about the myriad of problems that Donald Trump has in your TV appearances. Out of all the ones that concern you, the women, the emoluments clause, the potential collusion, and the list goes on, the conflicts of interest, etc. What concerns you the most?
That's very hard with respect to Donald Trump, but I got to say his threats to the freedom of the press are extremely dangerous. We have not seen rhetoric like this in a presidential election that we saw in 2016. We have not seen rhetoric since the presidential election in 1932 in Germany when Hitler ran against Hindenburg, and Hitler was using that language. His attacks on the free press are a threat to our democracy, and now he's putting those threats into action. He's also attacked a minority religious group, something else that was characteristic of the Nazi regime. His attacks on Muslims and his travel ban, which is a Muslim ban. The Supreme Court may not recognize that, but that's one reason I'm running for the Senate, because I'm going to go on the Senate Judiciary Committee. We're going to investigate that. And, we're going to be able to prove that's a Muslim ban. It's unconstitutional. He ought to be impeached and removed from office.
All right. Well, that is clear and strong. I like that. And I agree with you. I mean, over the weekend, it was more troubling signs as he said that the press is endangering people's lives, which makes no sense, and he made no reference to what he was referring to. But it would be a nice pretense to imprison journalists who don't agree with Donald Trump under the guise of, oh, they're putting people's lives at risk. And he also said that the Mueller investigation was a, quote, illegal scam. That would be another way to shut down an investigation that is investigating him. So let me ask one last question about Trump in that regard. If he fires Rosenstein and then Mueller, what do you think is the proper reaction that Republicans should have? Because it will, the Democrats, I think, will be clear, although with Democrats you never know. But we will need the Republicans to do the right thing. I don't know that they will, but what do you think the right thing would be if Trump were to fire Mueller?
Well, it'd be to impeach Trump, but the right thing to do right now would be to impeach Trump. I mean, he's committed multiple impeachable offenses. And I just discussed the First Amendment of the Constitution, the freedom of religion, the free exercise of religion in the press, and his obstruction of justice and the Russia investigation, his collusion with a foreign power, his receipt of money from foreign governments in violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution. I mean, it goes on and on with Donald Trump, and he makes the Richard Nixon look like small potatoes. But if he wants to go ahead and fire Mueller, of course I would say he ought to be impeached. But I don't know whether the Republicans will do anything. I think they're in bed with him. And I don't know what the Democrats are willing to do. I don't know where they draw the line. My opponent in this race, Tina Smith, has made it very clear that we should not be trying to impeach Donald Trump. Even though I look at the Constitution, I look at what he's doing, and I say, yeah, we got to get him out of there. So I have no idea what Congress is going to do, but we're going to replace Congress in November. We're going to have a new Congress to deal with in January, and hopefully they, are going to pay a little more attention.
So, Richard, I don't know what to make of you because you were a Democrat since you were in college. You obviously are animated about Trump in a way that is refreshing. But so why were you the chief ethics lawyer for George W. Bush?
Oh, I got involved in the Republican Party in New York. I was a lawyer in New York, and the Rockefeller Republicans, who were moderate Republicans, I guess these days they're called liberal Republicans, were quite influential. And then in Central Illinois, I went back there where I grew up, and down in Central Illinois, a lot of people were Republican just because they didn't like Mayor Daley's machine up in Chicago, and they certainly weren't progressive. It took them a very long time to recognize that African Americans really had any rights at all in the political process in the old Daley machine. So, we had liberal Republicans and conservative Republicans, just like they had arch conservative racist Democrats and liberal Democrats in the old days. But, I joined up with the Republican Party. My views are certainly toward the more progressive, moderate wing of the Republican Party. And of course, they purged those people bit by bit. But even recently, we had Mike Bloomberg elected mayor of New York City as a Republican. And he's one of the strongest proponents of gun regulations in the country. So there are a handful of people still left who are moderate Republicans. But under Donald Trump, they purged everyone from the party. Even Mike Bloomberg, he told everybody, of course, you got to vote Democrat. I mean, Donald Trump acts like a dictator. And then you have the influence of the religious right in the Republican Party, which is completely crazy, and all the big money in politics. And that's a problem for both parties. But the Democrats, they'll rail against the Citizens United case and campaign finance and everything, and then they're taking a bunch of money. So, I've been someone who wants to see change and progressive change in politics. And, I'd hope I could work for that in the Republican Party, but that's complete disaster. But I'm running into issues in the Democrat Party as well, because I say I won't take any money from PACs, no PAC money. They're good Democrats will do the same thing. Beto O'Rourke, he won't take PAC money. We have a Congress candidate for the United States Congress here in Minnesota, Dean Phillips. He won't take PAC money, but a bunch of them will, and then they get upset when you say you shouldn't take PAC money. And I just won't touch it. So we've got some serious issues to contend with in our democracy.
So, Richard, I want to come back to your time in the Bush administration in a second, but I want to pause here to agree with you. Unfortunately, the Democratic establishment fights to keep money in politics sometimes even harder than the Republican establishment does. Nancy Pelosi will fight against the convention to get money out of politics way harder than any Republican official in the country. And so Democratic Party is unfortunately a disaster in that regard. Just Democrats don't take corporate PAC money, and the Democratic establishment can't stand them, and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to defeat those uncorrupted candidates in primaries all across the country. So you're absolutely right about that. But I did want to ask you, it says in your bio that you had a role in creating two different groups to fight against money in politics, Represent Us and Take Back Our Republic. Both really great groups. Take Back Our Republic is a conservative group. Represent Us is nonpartisan, started by a progressive. So what was your role in creating those?
Well, the idea is to convince voters across the political spectrum that money in politics is destroying our system. So with Represent Us, the idea was to encourage more grassroots activism, particularly on the part of young people, to get out there and protest against money in politics. And it's a wonderful group, and we had a program down in New Orleans, and Jennifer Lawrence spoke. It was really fabulous, and it energized a lot of young people. And the other group, Take Back Our Republic, the objective there was to look at the conservative end of the political spectrum. People are a lot more conservative than I am on social issues or on national defense issues, a range of different things, and explain to them why they also lose in our current political system. Why what Mitch McConnell is advocating for is not in the interest of the grassroots conservatives. And so I helped Take Back Our Republic, and we found a man who was a lot more conservative than I am, John Pudner, to run it. We intentionally put the headquarters down in Alabama to make sure we could reach the grassroots down there. And then Harvard University gave me a grant per year to write a book on campaign finance reform and why the political conservatives ought to support campaign finance reform. And I went through all the different positions that conservatives take. A lot of them I don't agree with. For example, the social conservatives. I rarely agree with them on anything, but it goes through all of their positions and say, look, you also lose under this system of campaign finance. Yep. And I had a whole chapter in the book about foreign interference in our elections, and I really missed the boat. I published the book in January 2016, and I didn't even mention Donald Trump and Putin. Never thought this craziness would happen, but I did think with all the money in politics that you'd have, whether it's the Chinese or somebody, would figure out how to buy USA, and I still think we are still vulnerable, the United States, of being dominated by foreign powers, not just because of what happened with Russia, but because of our corrupt campaign finance system.
Yeah, God, we don't have enough time to squeeze all the topics in here as quickly as you can, Richard. But Bush had his own issues: warrantless wiretapping, violation of international laws during Iraq, torture, etc. So why be his chief ethics lawyer?
Tried to control as much as I could. I came in 2005 after everything was public about the torture memos, which I told them I strongly disagree with. I thought that was crazy what they were doing. It was immoral. It was torture. And then the wiretapping also was going on. The ethics lawyer at the White House deals with financial conflicts of interest. So you tell someone coming in, for example, to the Treasury Department, Hank Paulson, look, you have to sell all your Goldman Sachs stock in order to become Treasury Secretary. And sold $600 million worth of stock for him. I felt real bad for him. I never had to do with $600 million worth of stock. But anyway, it was a lot of his handholding for rich people, trying to get them to get rid of their investments that created conflicts of interest. Very similar job to what was done in the Clinton administration, Obama administration after myself. But they definitely did not go to the ethics lawyer and ask my advice about wiretapping. And there was one incident, they fired a bunch of United States attorneys for political reasons. And I got furious because I had to read about it in the New York Times. It's like, well, why didn't people come to me? And they say, well, that's just not what the ethics lawyer is here for. Whatever. But it was an interesting experience for 2.5 years. I did the best to keep things clean in my area where they let me work on things. But there were definitely problems. And I have to say, President Obama's in conflicts of interest, he made it much better with financial conflicts of interest because he put in an executive order in his first day in office that restricted the revolving door in and out of the administration from the lobbying shops on K Street. All the K Street people got furious with President Obama. But I was sitting there thinking, this is great, because if I had that executive order, the Obama executive order, to work with in the Bush White House, I would have been able to say no a lot more often. It has some law to back me up.
Yep. All right, we are out of time. Man, I would love to moderate the primary debate in Minnesota.
Well, I'd love to have a debate. I mean, if you could ask Senator Smith to have a debate, maybe we could do it on your show there. I'll anytime, anywhere. I told Senator Smith, anytime, anywhere, any format she chooses, I'll be there. So you should definitely invite her to debate. That's the way to beat Citizens United and campaign money. Instead of spending all that PAC money in stupid ads, just have a debate, put it online, everybody can watch it before the election.
Well, hard to argue with that. All right, we'll make the offer. Everybody, the website is painterminnesota.com, painterminnesota.com, and you see how to volunteer and donate there. Richard Painter, a fascinating individual, no question about that. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.